Hi, and welcome back to the HE Enable podcast. This is the show all about sharing our experiences of disability, neurodivergence, and long-term health conditions in the UK higher education system. I'm Kath, and this week I am joined by Murrin. Murrin is an EDI practitioner and activist who recently completed her bachelor's degree. She specialises in sharing her experience of the intersections of disability, race, gender, and sexuality. Murrin currently works at Disabled Students UK as a facilitator and disability consultant. It's an absolute pleasure to have her on the show today, and I am really excited for you and myself to learn more about Murrin and her work. Hi Murrin, welcome to the show. How's it going?
Hi, I'm good. It's lovely to be on the show and to meet you today.
Yes, absolutely. All my pleasure. Thank you so much for coming on. Please could you introduce yourself and just share a little about your background in higher education?
Yeah, of course. So I am a mature student. Well, I was a mature student. I didn't go to university at 18. I went to university when I was 22, kind of went on an unconventional way where I did my first year at college and then went on into second year university. My background is my bachelor's is in business management, and when I was at university, I was the EDI officer in the Students' Union as well. And during my course, as much as I liked studying business management, I realised that EDI is actually where my passion lies. So I'm taking a bit of a different kind of direction from the study itself, but the course itself and the university really helped me to figure out what I wanted to do.
That's really, really nice. So it sounds like you've had a really, nice supportive environment from the university. Good. We'll touch on it a little bit more later. For now, if you're comfortable saying, how did your disabilities, long-term health conditions impact your experience of higher education?
For sure, yeah. So I suppose to give some background, I have a bit of a roster of disabilities. So I have ME, CFS, fibromyalgia, endometriosis, and I was recently diagnosed with osteoarthritis, and ADHD and autism. So those last three diagnoses have actually just come in the last 2 months. So after I finished studying, so I went into higher education not knowing I was neurodiverse and kind of realising maybe about halfway through. So I think I was really fortunate from the get-go, because with being diagnosed with ME and fibro and endometriosis, I worked full-time from when I was age 16 until I went to university, and that really helped me know what reasonable adjustments and things that I needed. I got a lot of support at work. I had occupational therapist assessments and things like that. So I think that really prepared me for going into higher education and knowing what I needed. I think I would have been a bit lost if I'd gone straight from, school into education with the diagnosis, because I wouldn't quite know what I needed. And my first year at college, where I did my HNC, this was at Edinburgh College, it was a bit difficult. I think just getting used to education again, and I definitely learned there what it means to advocate for yourself and for your needs, which really set me up then for going to university after. So a bit of a unique path that I've kind of gone down, but overall it really worked out for me. And I think the adjustments that I had especially for my ME and my chronic pain, really helped adjustments for the undiagnosed neurodiversity, which I wasn't aware of at the time. But now I look back on and I see that they all really helped that. So, yeah.
Yeah. No, I get that. As someone who was diagnosed with ADHD really late in their degree, you always look back and you're like, oh, there's all the traits from when I was struggling with stuff. But that's really interesting. I actually had that conversation with Tom last week
Mm-hmm.
for our episode, and he was also saying he's a type 1 diabetic, how having the adjustments for the physical disability actually covered a lot of what he needed for his, he assumes, undiagnosed neurodivergence,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's a common thread. And I think in a way it's quite nice because it shows that people are getting the adjustments they need. Obviously, it's not everyone. That's what I think we need to improve on just as a society. But it is nice to see that kind of overlap.
Yeah.
I guess.
For sure, yeah.
Just as to debunk for the listeners, just some acronyms. So MECFS is chronic fatigue syndrome.
Chronic fatigue syndrome and myalgic encephalitis. I always struggle pronouncing it, so I always avoid pronouncing it.
I am glad I left that to you. I could not remember what it stood for. I've been to the clinics. I still couldn't remember what it stood for. So obviously you said that you came into university not necessarily knowing all of the conditions that you had, right?
Yes.
So you can answer this question kind of either retroactively or like with what you knew at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And you can also say it from the perspective of entering university in Edinburgh or from your foundation year, whatever you prefer.
Yeah.
What was your experience accessing higher education from a disability standpoint?
Yeah, so my experience after I did my first year at college and then coming in as a second year student, it was good, actually. I must say I did have a really positive experience. The reason I had a positive experience, I think, was because, I mean, it's a bit of a double-edged sword, I guess. So when I was studying my first year at Edinburgh College, I was actually really struggling physically with my ME, CFS, and recent diagnosis of fibromyalgia at the time. So a lot of the time I was actually bedbound and really struggling. So basically, after I somehow got a grade from the course, I then decided that actually I needed to take a year out. So I deferred my place at university, and that allowed me to get in touch with the university. So the university I went to is Queen Margaret University. So it's just outside Edinburgh in Musselburgh, East Lothian. And I got in touch with them, I think it was April, and then the course was starting in September. So I had a huge transition period to go into university, and I had a lot of time to speak with the disability advisors and kind of make sure that all the funding and so on and everything that I needed was in place well before starting the course, which made a huge difference. Because when I started my second year, I think it was about halfway through the first semester, I then got the call to say that I was at the top of the waiting list to get diagnostic surgery for endometriosis at that time. And I'd been waiting, I think, 3 or 4 years by that point. And that put a spanner in the works for sure. So although my experience going into university was very positive and it was really good, and I did find that there was a lot of support for me, when I got the news about the diagnosis and about going for the surgery, it threw me off a bit because I didn't quite know how to keep up. I did think about deferring the course again, but also it was a bit difficult. But I did find quite a lot of support at university during that time, and I managed through second year. So to put it lightly, I guess my first 2 years of higher education was a struggle. I struggled through them. I didn't perform to the best of my ability, which was really disheartening at the time. But yeah, I ended up smashing third and fourth year somehow, which was a surprise. I never expected to. I'm not someone that's, when I was younger, I used to take a lot of pride in academic achievements, but as I got older and I was dealing with ME and all the conditions I've got going on, I realised that can't be my priority and the end goal, because it might not be possible. So I really didn't have much expectation. But yeah, I think with the right supports and I guess the right diagnoses in place, it really made a difference.
Yeah, I remember at the start of my master's, I'd come out of a big burnout, and I was like, my goal is to make this out alive.
Yeah.
Like, you go to
exactly.
Oxford and they're like, I want to study, like, I want to, like, change the world, and, like, I'm doing this, I'm curing cancer. And I'm like, I want to get out of this conscious and alive. I want to pass.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's that's exactly how I felt, was just like, I'm here to pass the second year and third year and fourth year and just get through it. So yeah, completely relate with that.
Yeah, it's actually quite comforting because I'm hearing it, and like, in that respect, our stories are quite similar, and I think it's quite comforting, just on a personal level. So again, super appreciate you. Really appreciate you coming on the show. It's actually really interesting because you had like 2 transitions to uni, which is quite uncommon. So was it like, so my experience of just like going to college open days and stuff is that they normally offer like GCSE, and then it would be SQs, wouldn't it, in Scotland?
Yeah. So I did a higher national certificate, so a HNC, which is kind of equivalent to what you have in England of like a foundation year, basically.
So it was, but it's quite interesting because it was your first year as opposed to a foundation year. I feel like I know of colleges that do that. But it's cool because it makes it accessible.
Exactly.
And I think it's an option that's not talked about enough.
Yeah, and I think when I was at school, I didn't realise there was like other paths in getting to university. So I left school feeling a bit beaten down, I guess, just that I wasn't performing as well as I wanted to, and I struggled with the school environment. I mean, now I know that's because I was neurodivergent and not diagnosed with ADHD and autism, but at the time it was just a struggle, and I left as soon as I could, and then realising actually there are other ways for me to get into university, and with the professional experience that I'd built up, I had the qualifications to then do my first year of university, but not in the, I guess, traditional way, such as the first year at the campus. It was a first year at college instead. So yeah, it's quite interesting. I think it's maybe more common in Scotland, those kind of paths, but yeah.
Yeah, I know of it, but at least where I grew up, it wasn't necessarily common. But that being said, I was in a culture that was like straight to uni, right? So it wasn't necessarily, even if it's something that was on in my area, I might not have necessarily been aware of it just because of circumstances.
Yeah, totally.
But that is why we have the show. We have the show to learn.
Yes.
Next question. Kind of related to your answer from the last one. Did you encounter any obstacles during your experience of higher education? Did you overcome them? And if so, how?
I really struggle with exams and like recalling back information. And my second year, I came across a module that was going to be an exam, albeit an online exam. It just stressed me right out, and I thought, oh no, I can't do this. And at the time when I was getting support through the disability advisors, we didn't account for exams much because my course isn't exam heavy. So when I came across the fact that I would need to be sitting an exam, I met with the head of department at the time and just had a really open conversation with her about what this would mean for me to sit an exam. And also I kind of came along with suggestions. And I had my disability advisor at the time there to support me with the conversation as well, which is great because she really let me take the lead in it because I was confident in doing so, but also was there to have my back and say, like, agree with me. And the leader of the program didn't have any concerns or pushback, was very open, and I was really fortunate for that. Like, she was very open with me, listening to me, and I suggested that rather than doing the exam in the traditional way, doing it online is fine, but doing it within, I think it was an hour, doesn't work for me because I have fatigue, I have brain fog, and it's unlikely I'd be able to get through the full exam within the hour. So I actually suggested that it would maybe make sense to have a full day of being able to access the exam, come away, and take rest if I needed to, and then being able to go back to it. So they basically gave me like a full working day to do the exam, which is amazing. And I was like really grateful that we came to that conclusion, and I didn't have to fight for it. I just had to express my needs, which I know is not everyone's experience. And so I felt really fortunate in that time. I suppose it set me up for the rest of my years to know that if something wasn't quite working for me, I'd be able to go to whoever I needed to at that point and say, here's my concerns, and is there alternatives that we can do for this? And yeah, it really worked. So I think that built my confidence in kind of advocating as well. And don't get me wrong, prior to that, in previous education, I have come across more kind of stringent barriers I've had to come across. But thankfully in university, everyone was very open, which I think I'm really fortunate with.
Yeah, I think university, they can kind of make their own rules a bit more. Whereas if you're doing something else, they have like a standardized exam board. Again, I had that exact conversation with Tom last week, and it was like, he was like, in school they had like a bag of his insulin needles at the front and like everything he needed to manage his diabetes, and then at uni they were just like, do you want extra time and do you want to like just keep your stuff with you? I think because universities have the capacity to make their own rules, the people who want to help you aren't necessarily afraid of regulations.
Yes, exactly.
Because it's not that rules are made to be broken, but you're dealing with stuff within your own bureaucracy, right?
Yeah, for sure. And I think it's so important, I think, that higher education institutions like remember that they have the flexibility. They can bend the rules a little bit, which is why it should be more accessible than it is for some people.
Yeah, obviously there are exceptions where courses are accredited, and that probably needs to be looked at more closely as a sector, but accredited degrees aren't the majority.
Yes, exactly, yeah.
So the other thing is, like, I am very firmly, other than York, I've very firmly always been in the south of England. I'm not that familiar with kind of the layout of Scottish universities. Was yours relatively small, which made it easier to kind of sit down with people, get your support, as opposed to maybe like a larger institution?
So I actually chose my university for that very reason. Queen Margaret University is a relatively small institution, and prior to, like, I got my UCAS options through and things like that, the leading decision on actually choosing to go with Queen Margaret was the fact that it's smaller, so it's easier to access support. It's easier to get a response from disability advisors and other supports. And when I came to the university, that very much was the truth for me. I think I'm very aware, though, that I was in a really fortunate position and kind of a privileged position where I had experienced a taste of higher education before going into university, and then also experience with workplace accommodations and that self-advocacy, because I think a lot of students go into higher education and don't necessarily know how to get the right supports or advocate for themselves, and there's so many barriers that come in place, as we know. And I think I see it as a privilege that I had the experience of that before.
I actually just want to pick up on something you said there. So you mentioned that you picked your university because of its size.
Yeah.
As someone who tries to look at like accessibility metrics and student experience, it can be quite hard to pick stuff out on like the quality of the disability service. Like sometimes it's negatively skewed because people have bad experiences and they're the only people who write things. It's hard to get a definitive score. Was there any particular like research or metrics you used to kind of pick your university, or was it literally just the size of the institution?
So what I looked at as well with Queen Margaret was I looked at the number of mature students that were going there, and also the number of disabled students, which I actually, when I joined the university and was there, I was actually met with a few people who were similar to me who chose it for its size and were put off by bigger institutions potentially not being able to meet their needs because of their size. and the sheer volume of students they had. So yeah, so I looked at some metrics, but I also had a conversation. I think I had maybe multiple meetings with the disability team well before deciding like this is definitely the place. I wanted to make sure that the adjustments I had in place before would carry on, but also that maybe there was additional adjustments I could get. So those meetings, the meeting I had with the disability advisor really affirmed that I was like making the right decision.
It's always reassuring when you're seen, for sure.
Yeah, definitely.
So you mentioned earlier in the show, towards the top of it, that you were one of the disability officers at Queen Margaret Students' Union, right? So,
yes. Yes. So rather than disability student officer, it is a full like equity, diversity and inclusion, because it's a pretty small union as well. So I just don't think there's the capacity to have specific officers. But yeah, so that involved disability and everything.
That's fair. So I want to ask you a little bit more about that and a little bit more about the stuff you did outside of your studies. So were there any clubs, societies or initiatives that made a significant positive influence or significant positive impact on you when you were at uni?
So I was actually really unsociable when I went to university. I think because I struggled so much in my first year at college and then going into my first year at uni. I very much was of the mindset that I'm here to survive and get through this. And I just don't have the extra capacity to socialise much, which is a real shame, because when I got into my last year, there were some societies I was like, I wish I joined you, or I wish I'd done more with you. So actually going into the students' union as an officer, I was a bit on the outside, a bit nervous going into it because I wasn't so involved in the society space. So I would say unfortunately, in my experience, it wasn't like that, but that was a personal choice. And I'd say the main thing that helped me get through university was I had an in-person note taker who is the most amazing person, and she is neuroaffirming, very disability friendly, everything, and went above and beyond to support me in the ways that I needed. And yeah, I would say that I definitely leaned into her support, and I think, yeah, so I need to give her a little shout out for sure, because she really got me through it and helped me keep on track.
Was that an adjustment provided by your university, or was it like a disabled students allowance kind of thing?
Yeah, so that was funded through disabled students allowance, based on the assessment that I did with the disability advisors.
Oh, I'm so glad that proved really helpful to you. I guess if you want, now that we're talking about initiatives, you're welcome to talk a little bit more about your SU work.
Yeah, so it's an interesting story how I actually got into the student union. So when I first went into uni, like I say, I was kind of very closed off into myself and very much like, I'm here to achieve this and not pay attention to anything else. So I wasn't really very aware of what the student union did and things like that. But when I got into my third year, we were asked to source a placement, and this placement would be used as a reflective piece in our fourth year. So it was like a really important piece of work. And basically what I found was a huge barrier with that, because first of all, I receive like specific student benefits. So employment and support allowance, you can still claim that as a university student if you're disabled, and our class is a disabled student is what they call it. And that means that there are work limits that you have to adhere to, certain monetary caps that you can not go over. And essentially that meant that a lot of these really exciting placement opportunities that were out there were completely out of reach for me, not just from the benefits point of view, but also because I knew I couldn't go and work somewhere full time. And because I had to find somewhere that was part-time, it just really shortened the scope for me. And it was so disheartening at the time. And although the university were very flexible, they said, you can volunteer for your placement. There were so many things that they were offering that I thought was great, but I still very much felt that I was going to miss out on some really good opportunities because of my disabilities and my circumstances. So and I did secure a placement through Inclusion Scotland, who are amazing. They source internships for disabled students. And a lot of these internships are very disability friendly, flexible, and I ended up doing my internship with Volunteer Scotland, which is another great organisation, and I was really fortunate with that. The problem with the internship, and it's not a problem with the internship, I suppose they're limited in their funding, so they can only fund maybe one internship per year. So you can see how that's very competitive for so many students with disabilities across Scotland who are trying to get something to fit, like in my circumstance. And I was really grateful I got that, but disheartened that there wasn't as many opportunities. So I actually approached the student union after the placement, and I expressed my experience, and I said that I just felt like the university could maybe do a bit more to support disabled students in finding placements and sourcing placements that could be flexible. And that's when I heard about student officers. I never knew much about them before, to be honest. And the SU person at the time that I was speaking to was like, hey, we're actually running the student officer elections now, and I think you would make a great EDI officer. If you can get an application in the next 24 hours in, you should do it. You should totally do it. Like, you're going to have to do a campaign, but you have exactly the views that represent students, and I think you would make a great addition. So that's actually how I got into it. I then was like, okay, went away and thought about it and decided that I'd put my name forward as a nominee. And I was voted in after a campaign, which was a really good sense of achievement. Unfortunately, I think the stress of study overtook some of the really important work that I wanted to do, but I'm still proud of what I managed to do within my time. So in a nutshell, I guess that's my experience.
Oh, that's so wonderful. Yeah, I mean, I get it, right? Like, you don't necessarily want to take on too much extracurricular stuff, but if you have something that feels natural to you, like you have with EDI, for example, it doesn't necessarily feel like work, or it feels like the kind of work that kind of keeps you busy and you can kind of think about on the side, and it keeps you occupied, as opposed to being like something that's overwhelming or something that's all consuming, and it becomes a lot less overwhelming.
Exactly. Yeah, no, for sure. And the thing is, I still have so many ideas for the student union that I'd love to pass on to them, and I will do. It's been on my kind of like mental to-do list for months, that I think I think they've got a great opportunity. They can do really good things, and because the university is still in its early stages of building, I think there's really great opportunities for EDI. So yeah, it was a good experience.
And then I guess you've done kind of handover to the new EDI officer as well, and that probably had a lot of things that you wanted to include there as well.
Yeah, exactly. One of the key things that I did do when I was EDI officer was, establish a network for neurodivergent and disabled students. So we didn't get to really establish that until more the end of the second semester of my last year. So I had a good handover with their new EDI officer about taking that forward. But that's something I'm really proud of, to say, like, I helped to establish that. And I think it's because that's definitely a space that I think if it was available at the time when I'd started university, rather than going to societies and things, I definitely would have gone to that network for sure.
Yeah, it's a safe space. You've built your own safe space, and I think that is kind of inherently a good thing, and it'll attract the people that you want to attract without bringing too much effort to them. That's so lovely.
For sure, thank you.
Oh yeah, it sounds wonderful. I'm just going to flip the questions a little because I think the flow of the conversation's going the right way. You were recommended for the show by the president of Disabled Students UK, Sophie, who will be coming on in like 3 weeks, I think. Very excited for that one as well. But as a part of it, I was kind of looking at all of the kind of public speaking and EDI stuff you do at the moment. It's really, really impressive. So what I wanted to ask is, obviously you've done a lot for disabled students over the past few years, first year at university, then with Disabled Students UK. I know you've also got another upcoming talk with another organisation.
Yes, yes, I have a talk with Amnesty, and it's part of a UN working group.
That is incredible. But obviously you're doing all the CDI stuff. You might have already covered this, but I wanted to ask what inspired you to kind of pursue a career in EDI and disability activism.
Yeah, so I actually think it was, don't get me wrong, I've always been someone that will speak up and try to right the wrongs of the world, I suppose, even as a child. But I suppose I've always thought that I needed to take a step back from that. I don't know why. It's just been this inherent feeling. And I guess the real turning point was that conversation that I had with the student union, with one of the staff members, about the internships, because that really lit a passion inside of me where I was like, this is so frustrating. And I think the thing that was so clear to me is it wasn't a university problem necessarily. It wasn't a job problem necessarily. It wasn't a benefits problem necessarily. It was all of them. It was like this intersection of society having barriers for disabled people. And I think that was just like the turning point for me to say, actually, I am tired of this. And one of the reasons as well that I was so vocal about it at the time with the student union was because I had a really good friend at university who was living with disabilities, and she did not have the experience that I had with being able to be really loud about your access needs and supports. And I seen her really struggle. And I think that was one of the things that changed me, was there needs to be more looking at this area for all disabled people out there. And I think as well, for me, it then turned into sort of being an intersectional outlook, and in realizing I have like every single intersectionality, and I think it's really important that I use my voice, but also because I enjoy it. And yeah, just it's something that gets me out of bed every day. I think that's the main thing. And I never found that before. It's something that makes me want to do. I want to do it. It makes me get out of bed every day. It makes me really passionate, and it fulfills me when I'm in spaces that nourish each other in this way as well.
That's just really sweet. It's nice that finding a passion is always a wonderful thing, and I think the fact you've got it in an area where you get to help others as well is probably just like doubly nice for the soul. Exactly, yeah. That is so nice. I believe, so you were talking about intersections. Your upcoming talk is eco-disability, right? Yeah, so the talk with Amnesty is on eco-ableism and intersectionalities with eco-ableism. So I'm part of a working group where we talk about the intersectionalities of eco-ableism, and it's a global group as well. And they are doing this collab with Amnesty to basically give us a platform to share what that means to us and highlight intersectional voices, which is really important. I think it needs to be done more. And yeah, I'm really looking forward to it. It's a week on Saturday. I will be in London speaking there. I will try and come. I am London based. Oh, amazing. It'd be actually nice to meet you in person as opposed to the Microsoft Teams I record on.
For sure.
Obviously, this is a very important topic. I've done a little bit of reading. What is eco-ableism?
Yeah, so it's interesting because it's been on my mind like constantly recently because of the upcoming talk, but also because what I've realised is not a lot of people know what eco-ableism is. And I mean, it's totally fair because if it doesn't have an impact on you, you're not necessarily going to be aware of it. So eco-ableism is basically when decisions are made and say policies or movements are put in place that haven't consulted disabled people and haven't looked at lived experience and therefore puts further barriers in place for disabled people. I'm trying to think of an example, but personally, and it affects people all over the world. It's also, it's such a broad issue. I could spend ages talking about it, but I'll try and summarize. We no longer live there, but we lived in Leith in Edinburgh, and Edinburgh City Council have introduced low traffic neighbourhoods, and they introduced that into where we were living. Now, it's all for climate reasons. It's all to promote cleaner air, less cars, and so on. Great in theory, and I totally agree with it in theory. However, what that did was it actually made things like going to pick up medical prescriptions and go to GP appointments extremely difficult because they got rid of a lot of on-street parking, including disabled spaces, and they actually ended up putting a lot of like no loading bays everywhere. So even if you have a blue badge and you could park on a single or double yellow line, that wasn't a possibility anymore. So to go to the GP surgery, you would have to park quite far away to walk there, which most of the time when I'm visiting the GP isn't possible. So I would have to rely on my partner to drop me off at the door. If that isn't accessible, if he wasn't available, then I'd have to miss an appointment. So it's things that creep up in small ways, but it makes a huge impact, especially when you've settled somewhere and you're living there. So yeah, to give you in a bit of a nutshell, I suppose that is it.
That's one quick follow-up. So obviously that's like eco-ableism kind of implies it's the environment around you as well. Does that extend kind of into architectural design as well, or does that then expand into like design stuff?
Yeah, for sure. It's all to do. It's all to do with like building design, like even clean indoor air and things like that. So how pure your indoor air is, and there's been a lot of highlights in the media about issues with mold in like social housing properties and so on, which again inherently infects disabled people. So it's a huge topic. I think it affects a lot of things, not just your outdoor areas.
Maybe I need to come to this talk. That's really interesting.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Honestly, you should come, and there'll be some really interesting people there to meet and network with.
My ears have perked right up. Right, we have a few minutes left. We're going to do some rapid fires, okay?
Okay.
Answer this question however you please. Have you experienced any instances of your disability or disabilities proving helpful in a higher education setting?
Yes, I was so hyper-focused on my dissertation, my fourth year dissertation, which I did on the hyper-focus that I got out of doing it because I enjoyed it so much. Amazing. It got me through it, and it allowed me not to burn out for the last year.
It reminds me of, I had a guest a while ago who wrote his dissertation, submitted it 4 weeks early, and then wrote it in Spanish.
Wow.
Hyperfocus is a mysterious beast.
For sure, yeah.
And I guess you wouldn't have even realised because you didn't have your diagnosis at the time, right? Or you might have had an inkling, but...
Yeah, I was very much, I had an inkling that I was ADHD and autistic. I never really looked at my individual traits, so I didn't think hyperfocus was really my thing. Now looking back on it, I'm like, that's what got me through it.
Your brain was just along for the ride.
Yeah.
Couple questions left. Is there anything that you wish you had known about university before starting?
That's a good question. I think I wish I had paid more attention to the the supports, the communities, like the societies and the student union and things, I think that it's an undervalued resource.
Yeah, I think depending on the university, SUs are often underappreciated, but they are incredibly hardworking people, and the fact that you don't see them is a sign that they are working.
Exactly, that's so true.
So, nearly there. Obviously, you're still doing EDI stuff. Let's go quickly into a little bit more detail. What are you doing nowadays, and how have your past experiences in higher education affected this?
Yeah, so at the moment, my main job is with Disabled Students UK. I came across their organisation about 6 months ago, and it just happened to come across on, I think, my Facebook feed, and I thought, wow, what they're doing is amazing. I wish I'd known about them before. And I was fortunate that I followed them on socials and so on, and a few months later the job vacancies came available, and I was like, I must work there, like I have to work there. So I do that, and then on top of that, I've got my speaking event coming up, and I want to do more of that. I want to really amplify my voice a bit more. And yeah, currently I make TikToks. I do weekly blog, which is really just like a thought dump most of the time. And I post on Instagram, hopefully to raise awareness about, intersectionality and disability.
Good, and then that obviously gives you more capacity to collaborate as well. So we get to do stuff like this, which is lovely.
Exactly, yeah, which is great.
A couple more questions. We've obviously so far discussed kind of your experience as an individual, which is the point of the show, don't get me wrong. But if we were to zoom out, how do you think we could improve the experience of higher education as both individuals and a society?
Oh, that's a hard one.
It's a big question.
It is a big question. I think really the core of all of it is empathy and compassion. I think that to amplify empathy and compassion, I think that lived experience needs to be centered more. And I think it needs to be centered more across society. But I think also having lived experience voices, especially disabled voices in higher education institutions, could really make a big difference to creating a more inclusive student environment.
Yeah. And I think that kind of adds into the common thread of what we've been having so far, is that we want empathy, we want compassion, we want funding in the right places as well.
Yes, exactly.
Which is all kind of maybe difficult to achieve on paper, but if you get it right and you actually make an effort and you're seen making an effort, even just observing the effort, right, it would be a big win for the whole sector.
Exactly, 100%. And I have hopes for it. Yeah.
Final question, you ready?
Yes.
So we're going to get out of here. It's going to be done. Obviously, everything we've covered in this show has been quite broad. We've covered a lot of stuff. And it's been wonderful. But if we were to condense that down, what is one key takeaway you would like listeners to remember from your story?
So one key point I think that I want people to take away from my story is that late diagnosis is real, and it's a real thing, and we should definitely be, as a society, trying to work towards earlier diagnoses. But also, I just think that the disabled community really needs support right now, really needs advocacy, and really needs some community care. So if you are disabled yourself or have disabled friends, relatives, everything, please just show a little bit more compassion to yourself or compassion to your loved ones, because it's a hard time right now, especially in the UK, with everything going on with benefit cuts and so on. So yeah, that's my main thing, is learn compassion.
Concise. Good. I like it.
Great.
That's, compassion, self-compassion, compassion for others, all definitely very important things. And if we have a little bit more of it, life will get easier for a lot of people.
Exactly, yeah.
Right, Murrin, we've made it to the end. So, I'm just going to do my little closing bit, and then we will be done. HE Enabled is a show dedicated to sharing the experiences of disabled people, neurodivergent people, and those with long-term health conditions in the UK higher education system. If you have a story to share, it doesn't matter if you're student, support staff, academic, if you graduated years ago, I don't really care. I just want to have stories, I want them to be shared. Please feel free to email. The email is henabled@gmail.com, which is also available in the description of this show. Murrin, thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been amazing.
My pleasure. Take care.
Thanks.